all-night flower market, freight elevator, promise on the invoice. The flower market down by the river keeps its breath like a secret, and its lights like an apology. After midnight, the place turns into a city inside a city. Metal gates rolled halfway up, cold water beating on concrete, buyers talking in the shorthand of people who know the difference between color and consequence. I slipped in through the loading bay with my phone turned face down in my palm like a coin I wasn't ready to spend, and tucked it into my left pocket, the pocket I use for things that are supposed to make it home. Back home, Mateo had said, "Can we please talk tomorrow?" in the voice that means please stay now. Our couch is good at turning confession into theater. I left before the room could find its audience. Halfway down the stairs, my screen lit with a message from "In my contacts are in the way I label hazards to make them smaller. Dock 3 backstairs, just talk. Roofs forgive nobody in daylight, markets pretend they will." By day, I fix other people's paragraphs. By night, I try not to turn my own into weapons. Mateo and I have a code that works when we remember it. T means come here, you awake. Means I'm scared. Tomorrow means not yet, but don't go far. Ramai had re-entered orbit 2 months ago wearing shirts the color of paused traffic and a laugh that sounded like a glass being set down on a bar by someone who knows what they're doing. He didn't ask for anything. That was how I started bringing him everything. The market smelled like wet stems and cold metal. Tulips in crates leaned against each other like conspirators. Roses held their faces ready in water as if the morning were a jury they hoped to charm. Men in gloves wheeled trolleys past me, eyes asking the practical question, currency or story? A woman with a clipboard spoke into the radio like she had been appointed to keep the day from arriving. I found Ramai under a string of yellow bulbs that had seen better weather. He stood between stacks of eucalyptus the color of memory, jacket open, collar decisive, a white ribbon looped around his wrist the way some men wear religion. He smiled without using his teeth. He knows I am addicted to the part of restraint that begs to be proved wrong. "You came," he said, "because grown men never tire of pretending arrival is a plot twist." "I came to return something," I said. "My courage?" he asked. "Your name," I said. "It's been in my mouth too long for its own health." He chuckled the way he does when he wants me to forgive him in advance. "We could go upstairs," he said, nodding toward the freight elevator with its green cage door. "There's a landing where the orchids wait out the night. It would be a good place to be decent. Or not. I booked decency and I'm hopping you'll cancel." "You always book decency like a refundable ticket," I said. "Only when the exchange rate is hope," he said. His hand came up to straighten my lapel and then didn't. His fingers hovered a breath from my collar, a map folded back onto itself so it can pretend not to be useful. A boy with a pallet jack went past, the wheels making a sound like a verdict riding on small mercy. The foreman called out numbers that made no sense to anyone but flowers and men who buy them. "3 words," Ramai said quietly, glancing at the clipboard on the wall where an invoice lay tucked under a magnet. "Why are you here?" "3 words is cruel," I said. "That's why they work." He tugged the invoice free and handed me the stub. "There's pen in the cage." Someone had left a black marker on the elevator railing. I wrote proud at breakfast. Beneath it, smaller like a fuse I might never light, I wrote touch before arguing. I folded the invoice twice and slipped it back under the magnet. The freight elevator groaned, as if informed it would be hosting a bad example. "Will he forgive you for coming?" Ramai asked. "He might," I said. "He usually forgives me for leaving." We rode the elevator anyway. The cage rattled its old song. Between floors, the market's chorus softened into the private vowels people save for small rooms. He stood close because the elevator asked us to, heat arriving before hands do when men are trying to be better than their appetites. He didn't touch me. He knows I hate him more when he's kind. The landing smelled like orchids pretending to be patient. Boxes lined the wall, their lids cracked as if beauty needed ventilation. Ramai reached out, lifted one lid, and let me see the part of the world that keeps its opinions in white. He didn't move closer. The line of his throat looked like a road a good decision might finally take. "You booked a room," I said, "because repetition is a fire extinguisher I keep around for nights like this." "I reserved one," he said, mouth near my ear now, and the elevator forgot its job and let gravity do the listening. We could stand and look at the river and be brave the way people are brave when they delay the thing that will undo them and call it nobility. "You narrate like someone who wants to be quoted in an apology," I said. "I narrate like someone who knows you read for a living," he said. "Tell me no." I didn't. He didn't kiss me until I leaned in, the inch that writes men into being the kind they pretend they can be. His mouth was exact and patient. He tasted like mint and the idea of lime, and a problem I had no right to solve. When his hand found the back of my neck and pressed only as hard as an honest thing should, a sound left me I would deny under oath and recite in empty rooms. We didn't rush. We let heat write short sentences and breath do the punctuation. He mapped my jaw with the competence of a man who had practiced remorse and grown bored of calling that restraint. I learned the line behind his ear where regret forgets vocabulary. His palm slid under my shirt and paused flat on my heart, not a possession, a witness. The orchids pretended not to know us. We pretended it was courtesy rather than survival. "I shouldn't," I said, "because that line keeps me from saying worse." "Of course you shouldn't," he said, and kissed the place I had just used for defense. He guided my hand down with the care of a man who knows exactly what he's asking and is prepared to be decent about the answer. I closed my fingers around him, and he breathed my name like a country that had finally opened its borders. When he reached for me, I let him. The world narrowed to nerve and air, and the part of the night that believes men can be accurate about wanting. We came quiet because walls prefer prose to confession. He rested his forehead against mine, both of us shivering in the honest way. "Does the room still exist?" I asked. "It exists," he said. "I don't think we need it." We rode back down. The market had decided to forgive everyone, buyers talking numbers like lullabies, water running in trays like small applause. He slipped the invoice from under the magnet and tucked it into my left pocket with ceremonial slowness, fingers staying where they shouldn't for a half-second longer than the city allows. He took his hand back the way men take back hands when they're trying to fail differently. "Text me a weather report in the morning," he said. "Tell me if the kettle beat the reasons." "It usually does," I said, "when we let it." We left the loading bay separately because we weren't cowards. We were tired. The river smelled metallic and ambitious. I practiced smaller sentences on the walk home and threw away the ones that wanted to be paragraphs. The crosswalk gave me time. I took it. The kitchen made its little square of light the way it does when it believes in me. Mateo was on the floor with his back against the fridge, sleeves pushed up, one ankle crossed over the other, the posture manuals use when they draw people who are about to fix things. He didn't ask where I'd been. He tilted his head toward the space next to him. I sat down. The kettle stared us both down like an honest device waiting for someone to admit they were cold. "Do you want to be asked?" he said. "Please," I said, because prompts are the scaffolding of my better self. "Are you lonely?" "Some nights," I said. Not here, not when you ask first, not when the kettle outruns the reasons. I took his wrist and placed his hand on my forearm the way he does when he needs to make sure I'm not inventing weather. His thumb traced once and believed me. I feel useful, he said. I want to be wanted before I'm useful. Tonight's procedure, I said. Touch first, argue second, report later. The kettle clicked like a stamp in a country that still believes in stamps. We poured water over mint and named it dinner because names are mercies that don't require rehearsal. I took the crumpled invoice from my pocket and pinned it under the lemon-shaped magnet so that Proud at Breakfast faced the room. Mateo watched the words like a man who understands the cost of paper and decides to sign anyway. He picked up the dry erase marker and wrote beneath the lemon, "Tomorrow, keep the torque." He didn't grin. He looked like a man building a morning out of small, accurate pieces. We made a rule that wasn't noble and didn't pretend to be. When prosecution tried to wear a bathrobe, one of us would say flower market and the other would put the kettle on while the first put his hands where history could find them. We agreed to 5 words when 5 were enough. We agreed to stop at the shoulder, not the ditch. We agreed to try to want what we promised, and when we didn't, we would write 3 words and tell the room. Days did what days do when you're trying to be an amateur human with professional consistency. The invoice in my pocket learned the shape of my left hand. Paper learns its carriers. On the late bus, I wrote messages to no one that began "I didn't ask," because I thought that counted as kindness and ended "May your breakfast go right." I didn't send them. The not sending felt like a skill borrowed from men in gloves who convince air to behave. A week later, when afternoon tried to be a test, I walked through the market and bought nothing. I left a bottle of water by Dock 3 with a note, "For whoever is waiting for a sister." The foreman nodded like a bridge that is held and will hold again. On my way out, I slipped a blank invoice into my pocket and wrote "Turn toward your name" across the clean side. I did not light anything. That night we ate toast like it had been newly invented. We failed and failed differently and failed in ways that didn't require anyone to stand between crates pretending to know which bloom would save them. The room did not demand a verdict. The morning remembered its job. And when we said tomorrow out loud, it meant only what we let it mean.